Good morning. I'm Interim Chief Lim Moore. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to discuss my review of the inappropriate text messages that were shared by members of the Wichita Police Department, and then the city manager will say a few words after I conclude. As I've said throughout, I would report my findings and the information that I came up with. We're now here at that time to do so. I want to start by saying that it was important to me to be as transparent and forthcoming on these issues as legally possible. I recognize that there are many in our community that are angry about this incident. I am one of them. I've served 31 years with the Wichita Police Department in a variety of jobs. I am proud of the dedicated, selfless service of the vast majority of officers that I've had the privilege to work with throughout these years. When I was appointed interim chief, I was given the charge and the duty to make difficult decisions so that our city can move forward. That is why we're here today, to provide answers to the community to the full extent that I may be given, to the full extent of the decisions that I made in this process. For legal and HR reasons, I may not be able to give you all the details you want, but it is important to me that I am as fair and equitable to my officers and to the members of the community. As an overview, the texting misconduct occurred from May 2018 and February of 2021, and was discovered during an investigation involving a now former Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant who had been a member of the Wichita Police Department's Special Weapons and Tactics Team. In March, I took over my position as interim chief. It was then my duty to gather more facts about the case, perform my own due diligence regarding appropriate course of action, and determine what level of discipline is warranted, and to review previous disciplinary efforts. The content I was given to review was extensive. I originally underestimated the time that it took me to review and the conflict with my other duties, and I was dedicated to being thorough and precise in my work. During this review, I also sought extensive legal opinion as to what level of discipline I was permitted to give. I have provided the media a detailed copy of each investigation as well as my discipline in each case. But I want to take this opportunity to briefly discuss each item with you. First, item 1, the ultimate de-escalators, which involves Officer A, B, and C. This investigation involved a now former Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant texting 2 WPD members of the SWAT team, referring to them as the ultimate de-escalators for their involvement in officer-involved shooting incidents. The original discipline for Officer C and A was not sustained, failed to use good judgment, and they both did not receive discipline for their actions. After expanding the scope from a law enforcement lens and looking at the actions of the officers from the public view, it is evident that bragging about taking a person's life without whether justified or not, does not coincide with WPD's mission or training. The argument that this was a private conversation is superseded by the fact that the public had obtained the conversation and it was no longer private to the individuals involved. Officer C and A are now sustained for failure to use good judgment and will receive a written reprimand and are mandated to attend an approved sensitivity training within 45 days of the issuance of this discipline. Officer B terminated his employment with WPD. Item 2, homophobic epithets, which involves Officer A, F, G, and H. Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant started a text conversation with Wichita Police Officer E. The Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant made an inappropriate homophobic remark, and WPD Officer E stopped the conversation and did not respond to the comment. No one can predict what another person is going to say during a conversation, but we have control over how and if we respond to a comment. In this text string, WPD Officer E chose not to respond to the SO Sergeant. The original sustained finding will stand. However, WPD Officer E will be coached and mentored on reporting violations to his supervisors when he is aware of such violations. The rest of the conversation under this investigation involved the SO Sergeant of the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office and WPD members Officer G, Officer F, and Officer H. The conversation consisted of each of them speaking about their dislike towards the former Chief of Police. The former Chief of Police did not deem the negative conversation about himself as being a disciplinary matter, so no further discipline will be issued for WPD Officer G, F, or H. Item 3, racially inflammatory words, which involves Officer J. This investigation involved a now former Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant and WPD officer referred to as Officer J. The two exchanged a series of text messages which included racially inflammatory words and insensitive comments. WPD Officer J originally received a not sustained finding of failing to use good judgment, which resulted in no discipline for this involvement in acknowledging and accepting this discriminatory text by the Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant. It is believed that WPD Officer J has demonstrated the propensity to engage in racially offensive conversations with Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant and participated in a conversation which glorified violence against people of Hispanic descent. During WPD, which glorified officers, during WPD's investigation of Officer J, he demonstrated that at the time of the text, his understanding of the 3 percenters, which was described in the investigation, meant being loyal to America. But after learning about January 6th, he stopped claiming to be a 3 percenter because they did not represent the beliefs that he believed. WPD Officer J will be issued a sustained violation of conduct unbecoming 3.202D and will receive a total of 8 days off without pay. Item 4, save some targets for me, which involves Officer K. This investigation involved an unsolicited text message sent from Officer K to the Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant. The unsolicited text message from WPD Officer K sent to the Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant glorified shooting people in the community. Condoning violence and using it as a joke to make another feel good is not part of the mission or training of WPD. WPD Officer K terminated his employment with the Wichita Police Department. Item 5, Jamaica Goonie hooks, which involved Officer L. A Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant sent WPD Officer L a YouTube video which was available in 2015, but not in 2020 at the time of this investigation. WPD Officer L and Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant both boxed at the same gym, and WPD Officer L had the nickname for throwing wide goonie hooks while boxing. Nothing in the text message is racially inflammatory or offensive. This finding of not sustained will stand, no discipline will be issued. Item 6 is entitled Snitches, which involves Officer D. WPD Officer D and Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant sent multiple texts insulting the prior chief of police. WPD Officer D terminated his employment with WPD. That investigation is done. Item 7, Inappropriate Images, which involves WPD Officer I. Wichita Police Officer I sent an inappropriate meme to the Sedgwick County Sheriff Sergeant during a follow-up investigation under 22 PSB 1356. It was learned that the meme was originally sent by another WPD member to WPD Officer I. This information was not known by the executive staff at the time. The original sustained violation was issued to WPD Sergeant I for failing to use good judgment 3.207B, which resulted in a written reprimand. Though the intent of the meme was not meant to be discriminatory, it was created and distributed in an extremely bad taste, which brought the Wichita Police Department into a bad light and diminished public trust. The meme was racially offensive, and it did not reflect highly upon law enforcement. WPD Officer I's actions were more than failing to use good judgment. He will be sustained for conduct unbecoming and officer prohibited 3.201D. WPD Officer I will be suspended for a total of 8 days without pay. On item 8, Inappropriate Images, which involves Officer M. On March 24th of 2022, WPD Officer I was interviewed during an administrative internal investigation. During the interview, WPD Officer I stated he received the inappropriate image from WPD Officer M. An administrative investigation was authorized by me, and the findings were reviewed by WPD executive staff. Officer M was found to be in violation and sustained for violating conduct unbecoming and officer prohibited 3.201D. WPD Officer M will be suspended for a total of 8 days without pay. These decisions are my own, and I stand behind them. I was not given a directive by any individual officer on this issue, except for requesting guidance from the law department. It's my opinion that in matters of this level of seriousness, It requires leaders to take a stand and make hard calls themselves so that the city knows there's someone taking ultimate responsibility and oversight of these kinds of matters. I know that for some, this discipline is not going to be enough. You and I have heard, and I've heard your opinions, I've heard your thoughts, I've heard the comments, and I've had conversations with people. And I appreciate and honor your opinions. There are many different levels of offenses involved, and each case was looked at independently by me. I want to be clear that we have made strategic steps to move forward and to correct any deficiencies in our department and lead to the original steps of disciplinary procedures. As I've always done since I've taken over, what we must do together now is look forward. What Wichita needs and deserves is a department that is reflective of the values and cultures of this city. Residents deserve a high level of accountability from my department, and as long as I serve as chief, I will not tolerate the kind of behavior and will always seek for us to earn the trust of the residents of this great city. With that, I'm going to pass the podium over to City Manager Bob Layton.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. As I've said on several occasions, the behavior that Chief Moore just described does not reflect the values that I expect to be upheld in the police department. The text messages were racist, they were demeaning, they were insightful, and they should not be tolerated. After carefully reviewing the Chief's discipline, there are 3 incidents where I've decided to take additional action. I admit this is unusual, but I believe that these 3 incidents warrant more serious consequences than those imposed. And I intend no disrespect to Chief Moore in doing this. It is simply my response to behavior that I find unacceptable in the Wichita Police Department. In the cases of officers A, C, E, F, G, H, and L, I will not be making any changes. However, the following changes will be made to the discipline of officers I, J, and M. Officer M is the individual who originated the racist meme involving George Floyd shortly after the George Floyd murder, and during a time when we were experiencing local turmoil as a result. Officer M shared the meme with one person, but it was, as I said, racist, and it did not take into account the sense of injustice in our community at that time. Because of the offensive nature of the meme's message and the officer's lack of concern about the injustice that occurred, I am modifying his discipline to include the following. First, the maximum time of unpaid suspension under the disciplinary category of conduct unbecoming an officer will be imposed, and that's 15 days. Additionally, Officer M will be prohibited from serving in any special assignments until the officer has completed a cultural assessment, training, and coaching program. This program will be conducted by a community psychologist and leadership coach who is being selected in partnership with our local NAACP and the Wichita Ministerial League. Officer I received the meme from Officer M and distributed it widely in total disregard for its racist content and its harmful impact on our community. Because of this, I'm modifying the officer's discipline to include the maximum time of unpaid suspension under the disciplinary category of conduct unbecoming an officer, which, as I indicated before, is 15 days. Additionally, Officer I will be on desk duty and prohibited from serving in any special assignments until the officer has completed a cultural assessment, training, and coaching program utilizing the same professional that will be selected in partnership with the NAACP and the Wichita Ministerial League. The third officer, Officer J, sent text messages professing support for the 3 percenters. As you may know, members of the 3 percenters were present at the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. The group is an extremist, anti-government militia organization whose members have also expressed malicious racial and ethnic sentiments towards Muslims and immigrants. Officer J, as mentioned by the chief, Officer J has since expressed a fundamental ignorance of the movement's extremism and some of its members' propensity towards violence, and has expressed remorse. However, I cannot condone Wichita police officers espousing such views, and I'm modifying the officer's discipline to include desk duty until the officer completes a fitness for duty evaluation. That evaluation will be performed by a licensed clinical psychologist. The officer's future role in the department will be determined by the outcome of that evaluation. Again, I am taking these additional steps to send a strong and clear message that those with these types of beliefs are not welcome in our police department or in any position with the city of Wichita. As you know, I've initiated an evaluation of the police department by an outside professional firm. We received several responses to our request for a proposal, and we are in the final stages of selecting a company to do that work. We should have a firm selected in the next few weeks, and we're anxious for that work to begin. I am hopeful that this evaluation will let us know whether we have a systemic problem in the department that goes beyond those that we are aware of and highlighted here today. If so, I can assure you that steps will be taken to fix it. I will do whatever is necessary to ensure that our citizens have a department they can trust and be proud of. That's the end of my statement, and with that, the chief and I would be glad to answer any questions.